Spoiler alert, Harry Potter beats Voldemort. Also, please subscribe. I'm begging you. Anyway, with that out of the way, I don't think many would argue that the Harry Potter novels give our dearest Harry plot armor. It feels like no matter what he does or where he ends up, he always has the upper hand over Voldemort. I get it, Harry can't just die, he's the main character. But still, sometimes it feels like everything is going against him, but he still comes out on top. In particular, over Voldemort. When you actually go back through the books, there are several points where the Dark Lord is winning. He has control, he has the numbers, he has the advantage. And then, almost inexplicably, he gives it away. Which is exactly why today I want to examine the books with a little more scrutiny and extract 5 very plausible ways that Voldemort could have actually won. These aren't far-fetched explanations or over-the-top theories. These are very real and, most importantly, very canon-consistent moments where a single decision would have changed the entire outcome of the war. Let's dive into it. Number 1. Lily's sacrifice. We know that for most of the books and films, Harry carried a piece of Voldemort's soul with him. That is, until his showdown with Voldemort in the Forbidden Forest. Voldemort had raised his wand. His head was still tilted to one side, like a curious child, wondering what would happen if he proceeded. Harry looked back into the red eyes and wanted it to happen now, quickly, while he could still stand, before he lost control, before he betrayed fear. He saw the mouth move and a flash of green light, and everything was gone. After being struck by Voldemort's killing curse, Harry wakes up in a sort of limbo, where he's given the option of returning to the land of the living or moving on. The prevailing argument for why Harry has this option is because he wasn't killed, but merely the piece of Voldemort inside of him. Many incorrectly believe that it's purely Horcrux magic that tethers Harry to the mortal world, where in reality there's actually something else at play here. And it all dates back to when Voldemort gained his new corporeal form in Goblet of Fire. The true return of Voldemort occurred when he was given the regeneration potion, a potion that helps to restore non-corporeal wizards to their bodies. It's an old piece of dark magic that required 3 things: bone of father, flesh of servant, and most importantly, blood of foe. To create this potion, Wormtail and Barty Crouch Jr. helped Voldemort source these ingredients. They were able to use Wormtail's flesh, Voldemort's father's bone, and Harry's blood. But what's most interesting about this potion is that it ended up being a major contributing factor towards his downfall, because by rebuilding his body with Harry's blood, he inadvertently tethered himself to Harry via Lily's loving sacrifice. Dumbledore even confirms this. He took your blood and rebuilt his living body with it. Your blood in his veins, Harry. Lily's protection inside both of you. He tethered you to life while he lives. Something important worth mentioning here is that Voldemort explicitly chose Harry's blood on purpose, because he wanted to overcome the protection that had defeated him as a baby. Lily's sacrifice had made Harry untouchable to Voldemort, and by taking Harry's blood into his own body, Voldemort believed he would not only neutralize that protection, but also finally be able to touch and kill him. However, Harry's blood wasn't inherently necessary for the potion to work. Voldemort had a lot of enemies, and it's perfectly reasonable for us to assume that he could have used the blood of any of those foes. It wasn't required for the ritual to be Harry. It was just symbolic and personal. Therefore, if Voldemort had used someone else's blood in the resurrection ritual, Lily's protection would not have been carried into his new body, and this is an important distinction to note, because Lily's sacrifice didn't make Harry universally immune to death. It protected him specifically from Voldemort, the person who was offered the choice to spare her and chose to kill her instead. When Voldemort rebuilt his body using Harry's blood, he unintentionally extended that sacrificial protection into himself. As Dumbledore explains, this created a tether. As long as Voldemort lived with Lily's protection flowing in his veins, he anchored Harry to life. But if Voldemort had used another enemy's blood instead, one crucial element would be missing. There would be no shared blood protection binding their lives together. Lily's original sacrifice would still exist, but it wouldn't be preserved inside Voldemort's new body, which means that when Harry walked into the Forbidden Forest, there's a chance he could have died permanently, maybe not to Voldemort's curse, but to someone else's. So the critical mistake wasn't performing the ritual, it was insisting that it be Harry. If another foe had qualified for the regeneration potion and Voldemort had used their blood instead, it's very possible that Harry would have died. 2. A mother's love. The next moment that Voldemort could have won, interestingly, comes immediately after the moment that we previously discussed in the Forbidden Forest. Like I mentioned earlier, after being hit by Voldemort's killing curse, Harry wakes up in a sort of limbo where he's met by Dumbledore. And while we, the reader, are soon made aware that Harry has the option to return, the reality is that to everyone else in the Forbidden Forest, it appears as though he has died. And while the short period that Harry was dead may have gone by quickly for Harry, I suspect it would have felt like an eternity for the loved ones that witnessed his dead body. While Harry was discussing life and death with Dumbledore, everyone else thought that it was the end for our protagonist. And this brings us to the moment in question, the scene in which Narcissa Malfoy inspects Harry's dead body. Hands, softer than he had been expecting, touched Harry's face, pulled back an eyelid, crept beneath his shirt, down to his chest and felt his heart. He could hear the woman's fast breathing. Her long hair tickled his face. He knew that she could feel the steady pounding of life against his ribs. Is Draco alive? Is he in the castle? The whisper was barely audible. Her lips were an inch from his ear. Her head bent so low that her long hair shielded his face from the onlookers. Yes, he breathed back. He felt the hand on his chest contract. Her nails pierced him. Then it was withdrawn. She had sat up. "He is dead," Narcissa Malfoy called to the watchers. And now they shouted. Now they yelled in triumph and stamped their feet. And through his eyelids, Harry saw bursts of red and silver light shoot into the air in celebration. Still feigning death on the ground, he understood. Narcissa knew that the only way she would be permitted to enter Hogwarts and find her son was as part of the conquering army. She no longer cared whether Voldemort won. In this moment, we witness Narcissa lie to Voldemort and her fellow Death Eaters about Harry surviving, a decision which leads to a crucial turning point in the series. Put succinctly, it came down to her maternal instincts and her desire to protect her son Draco. She knew that lying to Voldemort would be the only way she would be able to return to the castle to search for Draco. She also knew that by confirming Harry's death, Voldemort wouldn't be able to resist the opportunity to return to the castle and flaunt his success. Though Narcissa was a devoted servant of the Dark Lord, her love for her family would always come first, and lying to Voldemort was a risk that she was willing to take to protect her son. Draco had been used and abused by Voldemort, and was given a nearly suicidal role in the war as a way of mocking the Malfoys, particularly Lucius, who had constantly let him down. It's likely that Narcissa resented Voldemort for that, and when she found out that Harry was still alive, she realized there was a very good chance that the good guys would prevail. Narcissa may have lied to Voldemort about Harry Potter being dead in order to protect her family, but what she may not have realized is that this completely changed the course of the story. And this is where things get really interesting. If Voldemort had simply checked whether Harry had truly died for himself, rather than relying on Narcissa's word, the outcome of the battle may have been entirely different. Voldemort had every reason to verify the kill personally. Harry was his primary target for over 16 years. He had already seen the killing curse fail once, and he had already experienced magical rebounds and protective enchantments tied to Harry specifically. Given that history, delegating confirmation to someone else was a strange and totally avoidable risk. Had Voldemort taken even minimal precautions, like using legilimency to probe Harry's mind, or even just checking his pulse, he likely would have discovered that Harry was still alive. Now, if Voldemort had realized that Harry survived the curse, he may not have been able to kill him outright in that moment. The blood tether created in Goblet of Fire meant that as long as Voldemort lived, Harry was anchored to life. A second killing curse from Voldemort himself may have simply repeated the same result, but discovering that Harry was alive would still have radically changed the situation. Voldemort could have restrained him, imprisoned him, ordered a follower to attempt the killing, or simply refused to march back to Hogwarts and stage a victory that wasn't real. But instead, he accepted Narcissa's declaration without hesitation, and that decision allowed Harry to be transported back to Hogwarts under the assumption that he was dead. It restored hope among the defenders, led directly to Neville's defiance, and ultimately resulted in Nagini's death, the destruction of Voldemort's final Horcrux. If Voldemort had just verified the kill and adjusted his strategy accordingly, the momentum of the battle would never have shifted. Even if he couldn't immediately eliminate Harry himself, exposing the truth in the forest could have prevented the chain of events that ultimately led to his defeat. 3. Avoiding the Elder Wand. Harry and Voldemort's final duel at the Battle of Hogwarts ends in a way that's almost poetic. The bang was like a cannon blast, and the golden flames that erupted between them at the dead center of the circle they'd been treading marked the point where the spells collided. Harry saw Voldemort's green jet meet his own spell, saw the Elder Wand fly high, dark against the sunrise, spinning across the enchanted ceiling like the head of Nagini, spinning through the air toward the master it would not kill, who had come to take full possession of it at last. And Harry, with the unerring skill of the Seeker, caught the wand in his free hand as Voldemort fell backward, arms splayed, the slit pupils of the scarlet eyes rolling upward. Tom Riddle hit the floor with a mundane finality, his body feeble and shrunken, the white hands empty, the snake-like face vacant and unknowing. Voldemort was dead, killed by his own rebounding curse, and Harry stood with two wands in his hand, staring down at his enemy's shell. Basically, Voldemort isn't defeated because he's weaker, but because the wand in his hand refuses to kill its true master. And that outcome traces back to a decision he made months earlier, to pursue the Elder Wand at all. The Elder Wand, also known as the Death Stick or the Wand of Destiny, is one of the three Deathly Hallows described in the tales of Beedle the Bard. According to the legend of the three brothers, Death crafted the wand for Antioch Peveril, granting him a weapon more powerful than any other. Throughout history, its allegiance has changed hands not through inheritance, but through conquest, usually violent conquest. Each new master must overpower the previous one. In more recent history, Gellert Grindelwald stole the wand from the wandmaker Miku Grigorovich and used it to build power across Europe. Albus Dumbledore then defeated Grindelwald in 1945, becoming the wand's new master. For over 50 years, Dumbledore wielded it quietly. However, when Draco Malfoy disarmed Dumbledore atop the Astronomy Tower, the wand's allegiance shifted, not to Snape, who killed Dumbledore, but to Draco. And when Harry later disarmed Draco at Malfoy Manor, the wand's loyalty passed again, which means that by the time Voldemort acquires the Elder Wand from Dumbledore's tomb, it doesn't belong to him. However, Voldemort doesn't understand this. He wrongly assumes that by killing Snape, the man who cast the killing curse on Dumbledore, the wand will transfer mastery. And acting on that assumption, he then murders Snape. However, this accomplishes nothing because Snape was never the wand's true master. When Voldemort finally confronts Harry in the Great Hall, he's wielding a wand that answers to his opponent. But the most unusual thing is that Voldemort really didn't need the Elder Wand at all. By Deathly Hallows, he controls the Ministry, he controls Hogwarts, the Order is fractured, the Defenders are exhausted, and from basically every angle, he is already winning the war. So if Voldemort had just ignored the legend of the Hallows and continued using his original U-Wand, it's likely that the final duel may have never happened in the way it did. By insisting on possessing the most powerful wand in existence, he places the outcome of the war in the hands of Wandlore he doesn't fully understand. Now, there's no guarantee that using a different wand or his original wand would have enabled him to defeat Harry, but it certainly would have saved him from his fate in the canon timeline where the Elder Wand turns on its master, and I'd be willing to bet that things would have turned out differently. Number 4. Killing Slughorn. Another moment where Voldemort could have dramatically altered the outcome of the war dates back to his time as a student at Hogwarts, long before Harry was even born. As a student, Tom Riddle sought out Professor Horace Slughorn to discuss Horcruxes, not just the concept itself, but specifically the possibility of splitting the soul multiple times. And Slughorn's memory, which is later recovered by Dumbledore and Harry, confirms to them that Voldemort never intended to make just one Horcrux. This was pivotal information in winning the war. Well, you split your soul, you see, and hide part of it in an object outside the body. Then, even if one's body is attacked or destroyed, one cannot die, for part of the soul remains earthbound and undamaged. But of course, existence in such a form, few would want it, Tom. Very few. Death would be preferable. The first thing I want to mention here is that Tom never actually needed to tell Slughorn anything in the first place. Slughorn didn't teach him how to make Horcruxes. He was just approached by Tom about the theoretical limits of the soul. Basically, the conversation wasn't a necessity, and that's one of the reasons that it was such a painful mistake. By articulating his intention to split his soul repeatedly, and then allowing the only witness to live, Voldemort created a surviving record of his plan for immortality, and it was that very same record that, decades later, became the confirmation Dumbledore needed to structure the Horcrux hunt. Had Voldemort simply kept his intentions to himself, there would have been no memory to recover and no confirmed roadmap to his destruction. By the time we reach Half-Blood Prince, Dumbledore already suspects Horcruxes. The diary destroyed in the Chamber of Secrets and the cursed ring recovered from the Gaunt Shack strongly suggest that Voldemort has anchored his soul to objects. But Dumbledore doesn't know this for certain, and it's only Slughorn's memory that provides clarity, specifically on the number of Horcruxes he created. Of course, the most straightforward solution would have been for Voldemort to never have that conversation with Slughorn in the first place, but unfortunately he did, which leaves one other option. If Voldemort had just killed Slughorn after their conversation, or really at any other point before the events of Half-Blood Prince, Dumbledore and Harry never would have had any confirmation on how many soul fragments Voldemort had. There would be no altered memory and no admission that he deliberately pursued repeated fragmentation, and I think that the implications of that uncertainty are significant. Without knowing the intended number of Horcruxes, the whole effort in destroying Voldemort lacks a defined endpoint. Destroying Horcruxes certainly would have been a step in the right direction, but without knowing how many he created exactly, 3, 8, 14, there'd be no way of knowing when the job was actually finished. This would of course also mean there would be no way of knowing when it was actually safe to attempt to kill Voldemort. As long as Horcruxes remained intact, any attempt on his life would be futile. Killing his physical body while even a single fragment of his soul survived would accomplish nothing beyond a temporary setback. The Horcrux hunt in Deathly Hallows works because it's finite, but if you remove that element, the war feels much more open-ended. By sparing Slughorn, Voldemort left behind a living record of his ambition, and more importantly, the roadmap to his destruction. Of course, there's no guarantee Voldemort would have won under these circumstances, but I'd be willing to bet that at the very least, the war would have gone on for many more years. Curious to hear what you all think on this one. 5. Better Horcruxes? Back on the topic of Horcruxes, another very real way Voldemort could have won is surprisingly simple: choosing meaningless objects and hiding them in obscure, untraceable locations. A grain of sand on a lost beach, a pebble at the bottom of the ocean, or a splinter of wood buried deep in an ancient forest. Objects with no history, no symbolism, and most importantly, no connection to him whatsoever. From a purely strategic standpoint, small insignificant objects scattered across remote locations would be functionally impossible to trace. Even if someone suspected Horcruxes, there would be no narrative thread to follow, no historical breadcrumbs, and no personal pattern to decode. But Voldemort of course made the foolish mistake of choosing artifacts tied directly to his identity: the locket, the cup, the diadem, the ring, the diary, and Nagini. Every single Horcrux is connected either to his lineage, his Hogwarts legacy, or a defining moment in his life. Basically, he saw them as trophies, and that's the weakness. Even Dumbledore identifies this pattern. Voldemort values symbols, he values history, he values significance. He associates himself with greatness and the founders of Hogwarts. That psychological profile is exactly what allows Dumbledore to predict what objects Voldemort would choose and where he might hide them. Had Voldemort selected truly random, ordinary objects and hidden them in geographically remote and unpredictable locations, the Horcrux hunt wouldn't have accomplished anything. The trio only succeed because there's a pattern to decode, a psychological fingerprint tying each object back to Voldemort's history. Voldemort didn't just want to survive, he wanted his immortality to mean something. The Horcruxes were statements. Beyond that, Voldemort also foolishly believed that by binding fragments of his soul to significant, traceable objects, he could better monitor and protect them. A Founder's Relic hidden in a location tied to his past felt secure because it was deliberate. Random debris scattered across the globe may have been harder for enemies to find, but it also would have been harder for him to track or recover if necessary. The last reason is Voldemort's aversion to the ordinary. Voldemort despised anything he considered common or beneath him. Using a common object like a pebble to house one of his soul fragments would have felt like an insult to his legacy. He didn't see himself as an ordinary wizard seeking survival, which is exactly why he believed his soul deserved exceptional vessels. Once again, better Horcruxes doesn't guarantee Voldemort's victory, but if we consider how close he was to winning, regardless of all of his mistakes, then this advantage does certainly edge him closer to victory, in my view. And on that note, that about sums up all of the ways Voldemort could have gained the upper hand. I'm sure I could think of plenty more here if I tried, but maybe I'll save that for another video. What do you guys think? How else could Voldemort have won the Wizarding War? Let me know down in the comment section below. Also, if you enjoy the content, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, remember, it does not do to dwell on dreams and to forget to live